All right, it is 5:30. The Finance and Personnel Committee is called to order. We'll begin with the roll. Alder Bellinger. Here. Alder Close. Here. Decker. Here. Perella.
Here.
Mitchell is here. We have a quorum. Will you all please join me in the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, that brings us to public comment, a limit of 3 minutes per person with comments limited to the item on this agenda. First, do we have anybody online that called in to comment?
Yeah, Devin Cole and Ivan Revenue.
Devin Cole would be the representative for the developer.
Okay, representative for the developer. Do we have anybody from the public that would like to comment?
Devin Coyle is the developer, so I don't think he would be offering a public comment. I didn't hear who that second name was.
I guess I'll ask the finance department because anybody attending remotely should call in to them if they want to make public comment. Did anybody? I now realize I'm not sure we have.
Yeah. This is Luke Pelton with on the Ivan Grebenik line.
Developer.
Sounds good, thank you. All right, then the room, is there anybody who would like to speak tonight?
Lisa Salgado, number 5. For the TID 23 Gartman Farm, the city has still not released Pelton's pro forma as requested by FOIA request several weeks ago. To prove why citizens need to give land away for $1 a parcel after we already paid over $5 million for the property. The city has not told us how this greenfield market rate housing project meets state TID requirements. The residential TID bill has not yet become law. We are building houses that Sheboygan residents cannot afford to live in, which defeats the purpose of building workforce housing. We are also using an out-of-town developer to directly compete with our local builder, Werner Homes, in the same area. There is also a red flag. Who is NBT? Citizens deserve to know the secret investor receiving public funds. And finally, the city has still not addressed the increase in property taxes to pay for city services for this new subdivision or school costs for added children. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
My name is Peter Jacobs, and I'm at 930 Meade Avenue. I am here to urge the committee to not approve the TID 23 development agreement. The agreement violates state statutes, commits the city to spending $100 million to subsidize a speculative development, and creates a glut of unnecessary housing that will only raise our property taxes. Wisconsin statutes prohibit TID project awards for greenfield residential subdivisions, such as that planned for the Gartman Farms acreage. Statutes also prohibit developer proposals consisting of 100% residential land use developments, as appears in TID 23. I urge the committee to not ignore state statutes and put our city in legal jeopardy. The contract was awarded to an out-of-town developer without seeking competitive bids. The developer is Pelton, who has historical ties to the city administrator. I urge the committee to not subject our city to the malfeasance that could come with cronyism. The contract gives title to 195 acres at no cost to the developer, and the city will pay for the infrastructure. The city will subsidize the development with $100 million in cost obligations. The developer has 25 years, or until 2051, to fulfill its contractual duties. If the developer goes out of business within that time, millions of our taxpayer dollars will go down the drain. The contract proposes 1,500 market rate homes. Homes at that price will not likely draw the desired workforce. Despite the 2023 housing study, there is no substantiated evidence that thousands of new homes are needed. Census data show our population has decreased nearly 2% in the last 5 years. Household formation is flat, and there's a generous 5.6% vacancy rate. If someone needs an apartment, they should check out the Gateway, which has 40 vacant places. Since the 2020 census, the city has added 1,450 TID subsidized new rental apartments. The city has already approved 670 additional TID subsidized homes to be constructed by 2028. With tonight's
Thank you,
TID
Mr. Jacobs, you're at
2023,
time.
okey doke, I urge the committee to not approve TID development agreement.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak? All right, in that case, we will move on to item 5, which is resolution number 190 of 2526, authorizing the appropriate city officials to enter into a tax incremental district development agreement with Timberwood Metals LLC for property located between Menning Road and Stall Road, more particularly described as the parcels listed on the agenda, and further authorizing the issuance of taxable tax increment project municipal revenue obligation.
Yes, I just want to take us through the timeline that I noted that I summarized prior, but I feel like it would help us paint the picture here. In 2008, Director Paulette Enders had purchased the Poth Farm. In 2018, Director Pelishek had then to purchase the Gartman Farm. There was a housing study done in 2023 that is based off of qualitative and also quantitative data, and that is how that 5,000 plus number was projected. Additionally, for about 6 to 7 years, SCEDC, Sheboygan County Economic Development Consortium, had marketed this land. It wasn't until a developer summit where all of our local and Wisconsin developers meet. It wasn't until then that there was some interest expressed specifically from Pelton developers. And with that being said, that brings us to today. So last Monday, the Finance and Personnel Committee met. The direction from the body was to see if there would be an affordability aspect added, acknowledging that this is a 1,514 unit development. The developer had run some numbers, and Devin and Luke are both on today virtually with all of the weather going on. They had let Casey and I know that the affordability aspect is something that they could not pursue. A copy of Devin's email is attached within the packet today. I would then defer to Devin Coyle to have him further expand on that.
Yeah, can you hear me, Taylor?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, so like Taylor said, I extended an email in response to last week's discussion, but to kind of recap, we've been busy reassessing and reflecting on the development plan this past week as a whole, and what led us to, I guess, this point in the design over the past 2 years of our planning and negotiations with different city officials. And I guess like everyone at the city, we want this development done right, and we want to hit the mark on what's needed in the community. Both the city and us as the developer are committing significant investment in pursuing this development, And we didn't take the feedback from last week lightly and wanted to put some real thought into addressing the questions around the HUD or affordability component. To do this, we went back to the housing study because we know it played us a significant role in forming what is the current vision for the development. We also made calls to our investors, partners, and lenders to talk through those requests and understand their perspective as potential stakeholders in the project. I'll get into more details behind the decision, but like Taylor said, what we've concluded from all of this is that the request to implement an affordable requirement on the rental housing will not be feasible for the success of this project as a whole. First, I guess I just want to reiterate the initial goals for the development, and most importantly, as we've alluded to, we're trying to address the housing study findings and recommendations, which suggests an overall housing shortage in Sheboygan. The primary recommendation from the housing study is to create more market rate housing and to create it fast. And included in that is workforce housing, as is requested by the local employers that were interviewed for the study. So the study suggests there's around 1,300 to 1,800 housing units needed in the near term, and it notes a 1% vacancy rate in the rental units today. What's needed right now is more housing options, and we need that to initiate the filtering effect by filling the gap of missing middle housing. Existing employees are buying down due to the low supply, which is preventing the lower income demographic from having housing supply to choose from that is within their price range. Like I mentioned last week, we're planning to address that by bringing modestly sized homes and apartments to the community at attainable prices. The rapid pace of construction on the Gartman property, while it will definitely be market driven in some capacity, is designed to address the overall housing shortage first and foremost. Secondly, I want to mention the compromises to the fundamentals behind the developers agreement and the details that were embedded in the agreement to make sure the city's financials are aligned and protected. One of those is hitting our tax increment milestones. We have to create increment fast enough to cover the infrastructure, the costs that the city is putting out to enable this project in the first place. Implementing rent caps or affordability components around this development is going to impact the income approach property values, which in turn will impact the tax value of the property. And ultimately, it'll cripple our ability to create tax revenue over time that offsets the city's costs. Secondly, the financial backing aspect. With the overall magnitude of the development, we need investors and lenders to be drawn to this opportunity to make it financially feasible. There's additional risk associated with affordability or HUD property development and even additional financing costs. We don't want to deter our financial backers from this development in the interest of the pace of construction as well, which is my third point. We need partners to be drawn to the development. Marketability and perception of the development as a whole is very important. We want to increase housing supply rapidly to help fill the demand suggested by the study. And the best way to do that is attract partners that can assist in the build out of quality housing for the community. Lastly, the incentive structure that's put forth today in the agreement isn't aligned for HUD specific development. There's additional financial gaps associated with that project historically, and other parties or grants are necessary from entities like WIDA and LIHTC, affordable housing funds, et cetera, to make those projects work. So that's my recap of the email and some more substance behind why we landed on the conclusion we did.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion from committee? Questions, comments? Alder Perrell.
Thank you, Mr. Coyle, to provide that feedback and for the letter that you sent ahead of time. I had to express my disappointment with this response. I was hoping that you would consider, that the developer would consider perhaps even a different percentage, which weren't a question, if you don't mind, responding to that is, have you considered a lower percentage? I know we came up with this number of 20% of affordability commitment. Have you considered lower percentages?
I can answer that. That's definitely something that I had asked Devin on. Would he be willing to do 15, 10, 5? Is that something that he would be willing to consider? And Devin, feel free to correct me. He had said that the part of the financial aspect of it, his donors and the people that he was financially collaborating with, they did have some continued concern from that. And Devin, feel free to correct me, but to make this project work up front, you do have to put out $72 million, acknowledging that there are a lot of banks, there are a lot of financial elements there to make that work. Devin, is that accurate?
Yeah, and I don't know if we have an exact number on the capital investment needed to get things started here, but there is certainly just getting the capital together to satisfy the lenders and kick off the initial construction efforts. So,
May I have a follow-up, Chair? Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that. Also, I do appreciate and recognize the investment of the developer, and that's the reason that I'm interested in this project moving forward, because I recognize that there is an investment from the developer and there is a huge investment from the city as well. So I find this agreement, this project, somewhat balanced, in my opinion. And that's the reason that I would like it to move forward. However, I wanted to mention something which is not of trivial importance since the house study was referenced. So in the current draft of our comprehensive plan, there is a reference to the profile of our household income in Sheboygan. And I just want to, and actually it's a very good, well-done section in which, and maybe Mr. Coyle is not aware of it, I don't know, but so the existing household in Sheboygan, there is 1/3 of Sheboygan existing household, about 34%, that has a household which is deemed extremely low and very low. This is 34%. So 34% of Sheboygan population has a household income that, if you calculate on 30% of that income being used for renting, they could not afford more than $804 if it is extremely low, and no more than $1,185 if it is very low. This is 1/3. Now, I made a quick math of what is, and that may be wrong. It was very quick right before the meeting, of how many affordable units we have created so far. And including this big project, my calculation, and again, please forgive me if I'm wrong, my calculation is that the actual affordable housing in relation to what we have already created and those that we plan to create does not exceed 6%. Now, this is our biggest project, and there is a division of financial responsibilities. We both parties are investing a lot. It seems only logical, based on numbers, that we try to cover some of our affordability gap in Sheboygan through this project. Again, 34% of our population household is extremely low and very low.
Thank you, Alder Perella. Alder Close.
Thank you. And again, I want to acknowledge all of the work that's gone into this agreement and all of the work that's gone in so far. This is, again, a huge undertaking to get something that's multi-phased and financed in the way that it is to fruition to this point. I also want to acknowledge the potential benefits of a development like this. This will, in the scope of the project as is right now, will definitely relieve a lot of the current housing stock and reduce pressure on rents going forward. We're also seeing that with other developments that have gone forward as well. Data from 2025 shows that rents in Sheboygan County and the city of Sheboygan have begun to plateau. So those developments are starting to begin to relieve pressure, and we can see more of that from a thing like this. My worry, again, is, and I'll just say my comment is, I want to make sure that this is affordable in some scope, and I understand the financial issues down the line of making sure that something like this is profitable in the future. This is a business enterprise after all. But we want to make sure that the deal is good for Sheboygan as well. We want to make sure that there is a certain percentage of this that is guaranteed to be affordable. And while I know that it was mentioned earlier that this is potential workforce housing, I want to make sure that any percentage of this is guaranteed for affordability for city of Sheboygan folks who live here currently. My worry is that if financial situations in the future become tight and financing becomes difficult and making these units become profitable gets more difficult over time, that these prices will only skyrocket. And the only thing that potentially safeguards that is having some language in this agreement that guarantees some percentage of them are rated to affordability per our city standards, per the HUD standards. So that's my one big issue with this. And I understand from a financial standpoint, from the developer standpoint, trying to make sure that this is profitable into the future, but we also need to make sure that this is a good deal for the city. The question that I do have is, you had mentioned workforce housing and how this will be available as workforce housing. If they're still on the line, Devin, could you please speak to the workforce housing part of this development and how that is being developed in and which phase and how that will come to fruition throughout this project?
Yeah, I think what we mean by workforce housing is just providing housing that's in that missing middle zone. So like I said last week at the committee meeting, the single family housing we're developing is on smaller lot sizes, and we're targeting a $325,000 to $450,000 single family home. It goes down from there when we start talking detached or attached versus detached. So the duplex houses would be the 325 zone. If you up it to fourplexes or greater, I guess you start to reduce that further. I can't quote exactly what those price ranges are going to be right now, but what we're doing with the apartments similarly is having modest rents. We're not downtown, like I said last week. We're removed from that, and we're going to have a more rural development until we get to that 18th Street corridor, and our rents are around the state consistently around that $1,200 to $1,450, $1,500 range for ones and twos. So well below if you reference the 30% of income in the area, that's well below the affordability or attainable price range is I guess our target there to hit that workforce where it benefits them most.
To answer that more specifically, the single-family housing that Devin just mentioned, that looks like it's predominantly in Phase 2 and Phase 4. Phase 3 is townhomes and also apartment complexes. Phase 5 is the senior living, the apartments, gas station, daycare, and other amenities associated with that. So to answer your question, predominantly Phase 2 and 4.
That answer your question? Alder Decker.
Yes, I just want a quick question for Director Zeinert and possibly for Administrator Bradley. It goes back to that housing study and such like that. As I recall, when we were looking at the housing study, one of the things that was shown up, or kind of a glaring thing, is the amount of people that are under renting, that are renting a home that is less than what they really desire. This project, even though some of the may not be themselves affordable, the desire and the possibilities are great that this will open up more affordable housing. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I call it the housing circle, acknowledging that there is that transition from apartment to home, or from home to apartment based on someone's financial and personal needs. So the hope is, yes, is acknowledging that this will free up future housing options.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion from committee? All right, since we've already been discussing this, and barring objection, I'll consider this taken off the table by unanimous consent. Seeing no objection to taking the item off the table, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
All right, we have a motion by Alder Decker, a second by Alder Bellinger. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Chair votes aye. The ayes have it, and the motion passes. That item is approved. The next regular meeting date is March 23rd, but we may have another special meeting in between. We'll find out. Until then, we have exhausted our agenda and are looking for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Alder Bellinger, a second by Alder Decker. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye. The ayes have it, and the motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.